So now we come to chapter 11, which is a continuation of the argument from chapter 9, which we saw yesterday. So take a moment to pause the video now and read the chapter. It's quite a long chapter and it covers a lot of ground. But in any case, Paul is now talking about the dangers of idolatry. He compares the Old Testament wanderings as an example in the first 13 verses. And his conclusion? Pagan sacrifice, idolatry, and the Lord's table do not mix. And that's his argument through 14 through to the end of 22. So what I would like to do now is just compare. Let's have a look at the argument that Paul has used. The Israelites in the wilderness, they were baptized into Moses, but the church, Christians are baptized into Christ. The Israelites followed the cloud, but Christians have the Holy Spirit. The Israelites went through the waters of the Red Sea, but Christians go through the waters of baptism. The Israelites had spiritual food, manna, but Christians have Eucharistic bread at communion. The Israelites drank spiritual water they drank water from the rock, and Christians drink Eucharistic wine, the blood of Christ. And Yahweh is their rock, as it says in Deuteronomy 32. And Paul explicitly says Christ is our rock. It's a brilliant comparison that Paul makes. I'd like to observe, though, this is what we're doing as we go through carefully. Just observe what the text is saying. In the previous chapter, do you remember that there were 18 questions that Paul asked? Some of those questions, not the same questions, but a swift repetition of these questions continue into chapter 10 with Paul asking 7 more rhetorical questions. He is peppering the people with rhetorical questions. Then he comes to verse 23 and he raises one of their slogans to them and throws it essentially back into their face, where they would say, "All things are lawful for me. I can do anything I like." This seems to be their ready-made excuse. I can do anything. I can do anything to anyone. I can do anything to anyone, anywhere, at any time. I'm free. All is lawful, so they would say. Paul's reply is, yes, that might be true, but not all is helpful. Yes, that might be true, but not everything that you choose to do in your rightful lawfulness builds up. Someone said it is a defiant madness to flaunt one's rights in the face of God in such a way. Now look at verse 24. The logic of the gospel is now brought to bear. Paul says you can eat whatever you want. This is a big deal with meat sacrificed to idols and people going to other people's houses with the sacrifices having already taken place. Do they know that's happened? Don't they know it's happened? Paul is now talking about not self-seeking, not using that knowledge and that freedom willy-nilly when others may stumble. He's already used this argument before. But what does he argue for? A right application of the use of the freedom that the Christian has. What is love? Love is willing the good of the other. It's seeking out the other and not asserting your own rights in a given situation. So Paul is arguing really for eating with distinction. Eat in good neighbourly conscience and refuse when necessary in sanctified gospel wisdom. And this is how Paul is bringing to bear the application of the gospel. So for example, if I wanted to borrow £1,000 and someone gave that to me as a loan, then great, all well and good. But what if they told me that they had stolen the money the day before? Would I take that as a loan? Well, no. Now apply that to the meat and the food problem that Paul is talking about. I wouldn't touch it. And that's what Paul says about the meat. If you know that it's been given to an idol, don't touch it. In the same way that I wouldn't cook sausage casserole when I know that a vegetarian is coming round for dinner. Paul is saying that his liberty is not determined by someone else's conscience. We can apply this in so many ways today. My liberty is not determined by someone else's conscience, but my action is determined by my love willing the good of the other. That's how Paul wants us to think. A Christian is not constrained by the petty judgmentalism of other people. And so often we have fallen in that sense when we make our wrong judgments too quickly. So Paul says, give no offence, eat and drink to the glory of God, that people may be saved. That's his goal, that people may be saved. And then he says, imitate me.